All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We're going to unpack a really pivotal chapter in history today, taking a synoptic view of two incredibly complex and controversial decades in Indian politics. If you want to understand the modern democratic landscape of India, you absolutely have to look at the period starting from 1989. It was this wild era where a bunch of different factors collided to produce totally unanticipated outcomes, completely reshaping the country's political DNA. And honestly, the political landscape of the 1990s literally was a roller coaster. You had leaders like Rajiv Gandhi, VP Singh, LK Advani, all just trying to navigate these massive fires fueled by reservations, communalism, and regional disputes. The ups and downs of political parties during this time truly felt like a chaotic, unpredictable ride where all the old rules were basically thrown out the window.
So, what does this all mean for us? Well, we're challenged right away with four central, highly sensitive questions about coalition politics, Mendelisation, the Ram Janmabhoomi movement, and a new policy consensus. We aren't just exploring historical trivia here. These are the actual keys you need to understand how today's political representation and choices evolved. We simply cannot avoid these themes if we want to make sense of India's present democratic reality.
To avoid getting lost in all that chaos, we're going to structure this explainer around five massive pillars of change: the end of Congress dominance, the rise of the Mendeloo issue, the new economic policy, religion and the Ayodhya issue, and finally, the new coalition consensus.
Part 1. The end of Congress dominance.
Let's start with this first and perhaps most immediate shock to the political system. Back in the 1984 Lok Sabha elections, the Congress Party held a staggering 415 seats. But by the 1999 elections, they plummeted to just 197 seats. This wasn't just a loss, it was a fundamental fracturing of the political landscape.
Now, 1989 officially marked the end of what political scientists call the Congress system. To be clear, Congress definitely didn't disappear. They remained an immensely important player, bouncing back to power in 1991 and actually ruled the country more than any other party in the period since 1989. But they permanently lost that undisputed aura of invincibility and dominant centrality they had historically enjoyed. The door was now kicked wide open for a highly competitive multi-party system.
Part 2. Rise of the Mandel issue.
Right exactly as that old system was weakening, we see a massive shift in the country's social fabric. This is the rise of the OBCs as a major political force. OBC, which stands for Other Backward Classes, is an administrative category for communities suffering from educational and social backwardness, distinct from scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. As support for Congress dropped among these groups, it created a massive space for non-Congress parties with heavy rural support, to rise up and really champion their political awakening.
Then, in 1990, a massive turning point happens. The new National Front government decides to implement the Mandel Commission's recommendation to reserve central government jobs for OBCs. This single decision triggered widespread, violent anti-Mandel protests all over the country. This intense dispute between the supporters and opponents of OBC reservations became known as the Mandel issue, and it fundamentally rewired national politics, completely changing how millions of Indians cast their vote.
Part 3. The new economic policy.
At this exact same time, the country's financial trajectory takes a radically different turn. We get the Structural Adjustment Program, or the new economic reforms. Initiated under Rajiv Gandhi, these became highly visible in 1991 under Prime Minister Narasimha Rao and Finance Minister Manmohan Singh. It completely altered the direction the Indian economy had pursued since independence. And while these policies faced heavy criticism back then, and honestly still do today from various movements, pragmatism kinda won out over ideology. Literally every subsequent government that has come to power has continued to follow this new economic path.
Part 4. Religion and the Ayodhya issue. This brings us to a highly visible shift that sparked intense, ongoing debates about secularism and democracy in India. Back in 1980, supporters of the erstwhile Jana Sangh formed the Bharatiya Janata Party, or the BJP. Initially, they actually adopted a platform of Gandhian socialism, but after facing a lack of electoral success in 1984, the party made a significant pivot. Post-1986, the BJP began heavily emphasizing nationalism as its core ideology and utilized the politics of Hindutva for widespread mobilization, and this completely changed the electoral math of the country.
A central focus of this mobilization became the Ayodhya issue. Now, this is a deeply rooted historical conflict with documented disputes going all the way back to 1528. But in the 1990s, this 500-year-long history came to the absolute forefront of national politics. It involves incredibly complex contentions and differing perspectives from various stakeholders regarding the birthplace of Sri Ram, one of the most holy religious sites, and its legal ownership. It easily became a defining, deeply polarizing political issue of the decade.
Part 5. The New Coalition Consensus. So, out of all this immense fragmentation and ideological shifting, we arrive at a completely new reality, the era of coalition governments. By the time we look at the 2004 election results, it's totally clear that no single party could just rule alone anymore. Take the 1996 United Front government, for example. It was highly unstable, propped up by the Congress and the left just to keep the BJP out of power. But it proved that coalitions are the new logic of India's democratic politics. National parties literally had to share power with state-level regional movements. And here's the really wild part. Out of this coalition era, a surprisingly durable implicit agreement emerged among the main political actors. Despite fierce, intense competition, there are 4 key elements to this new consensus. First, an acceptance across the board of the new economic policies. Second, the acceptance of political and educational reservations for backward classes. Third, a recognized central role for state-level parties in national governance. And fourth, an emphasis on power sharing and pragmatic considerations over rigid ideological purity. Basically, parties with clashing beliefs just learned how to govern together to complete their terms. We've seen how the roller coaster of the 1990s dismantled the old system and led to this new competitive consensus. But remember, democracy doesn't just stand still. Even as political parties operate within this new consensus, popular movements are constantly out there pushing issues like minimum wages, displacement, and social security right back onto the agenda. So as citizens continue to demand justice in terms of class, caste, gender, and region, we have to ask, what unanticipated outcomes will this continuous democratic churning produce next? It's a fascinating thought to leave you with. Thanks for joining this explainer, and keep questioning the history that shapes our present.